Interest came originally from my parents, who were, although neither of them was a professional musician, they had other professions entirely. They're both very interested in music, in classical music in particular. And my father did a lot of singing, and my mother played the piano really quite well. I took up the flute at a certain stage and studied with André Prieur, who was the principal flautist with the RTE Symphony Orchestra. So that was a whole new dimension in musical education. And I found that very exciting. It had opened up the world of orchestral music to me as well. Played in the Irish Youth Orchestra, played at its first concert, I remember. And gradually, though, my interest became more and more centred on the piano. That it was always going to be the instrument of my choice. I was offered a job in the College of Music as a piano teacher, and it really was not a good idea, because I remember very clearly from the first day I walked into teaching, I disliked it. There's no doubt in my mind that the most important decision I ever made was to leave the job I had in the College of Music. I knew that it was never going to lead me to finding me, and I had to get out, I had to cut loose, I had to live dangerously to find what I really wanted to be. So after that, after I left, I was lucky. This is going to sound funny. I was lucky because I had a bad car crash 4 months later. And what that did was it turned my whole life upside down. And the freelance work that I was getting involved in, a lot of work for RTE, I'd been asked to conduct for a musical society, and I thought maybe I'd go down that road, do a lot of that, get some experience conducting and so on. And that was all interrupted by the car crash. And that really put my back up against the wall, because suddenly I didn't have enough money, and I had the house to pay for, etc. Everybody got the same problem, and I had to think very hard, you know, what am I going to find for myself? How am I going to get this conducting thing? How am I going to get myself an orchestra? I became aware of the social employment scheme by accident, and I was asked to do some voice classes down the Actors Centre, Norman Quay. And when I was there, I discovered that they were running a big social employment scheme for actors. They had about 40 of them down there, and I thought, right, if you can run a theatre company, you can run an orchestra. And that was the germ of the idea. Now that was in 86, in the summer of 86, and it took me 2 years to actually get it up and running. The range of background of the musicians is colossal. I mean, physically they come from Tala, Rush, Westport, the north of Ireland, Germany, France, Iran. From a training point of view, I know that the minority of them were trained to be professional musicians. It really seemed to me to be totally unlikely that I was going to get what I wanted out of this, an orchestra playing Verdi and Tchaikovsky and Bach. And for a lot of them, their musical experience was, if the ones who, say, were non-professional in any sense, would have been more in concert bands, that kind of thing, where they'd be playing light music, I mean non-classical music, definitely. So the movement into becoming an orchestra was painful.
I was on the dole and I saw this thing on a notice board. I think it said musicians wanted to form orchestra, contact. I can't remember now, but that's what I did. Here I am, carrying on good up. My father was a drummer in the Kilchillan accordion band, and so was I. That's how it all began. And then I joined the army band in 1960. So I continued to put it that way, but I learned to read and write then in the army. And I left in 72. I went to America, didn't like it, came home, and then everything from driving a truck to driving a van to pumping petrol. Anything goes.
Well, I was cooking for a living, so I tried to combine the two in order to survive, and tried to work and cram the practice in, and it didn't work. So 2.5 years ago, I decided it was either cooking or music. So packed up the cooking and went off to London for a year to study with 2 teachers over there and get as much playing experience as possible. And then I came back here after a year in London for the summer holidays, and this scheme that I'm on at the moment came up, which meant I could stay in Ireland and play.
I was taken to a concert given by the RTE1 Boys band, I think in the O'Connell Boys Hall or something like that, because my mother was very interested in me, playing music. So I went along to this, and I was a bit put off with the fact that they wore short trousers and whatever, but the actual musicality of the thing, or the performance, impressed me. So I joined that. So that meant, for most of my secondary school going years, and some of my primary school going years, I attended that band every single night, 5 days a week. So that's my experience in music, has always been in the band world.
Well, I'm not really a musician. Music was what I would call a serious hobby. And I played in a youth orchestra in Germany, and then in an amateur orchestra. And when I came over to Ireland, I joined the Dublin Orchestral Players, a very good amateur orchestra here. And it was only after 2.5 years of unemployment that I came across Ethna Tinney's Classical Graffiti and thought it was a good idea to do something meaningful with your time.
I think from the point of view of their lives, that classical graffiti has been a gift in a way. I mean, they say that themselves. They never thought when they started that a year later that we'd be playing at the Budweiser Derby, for example, in the VIP tent, that we'd be making a record for Polygram on the Philips label, that we'd be wined and dined by the Lord Mayor in the Mansion House. Amazing things have happened, and that's been very good for them. And I think, it's a great demonstration of how, in fact, anything is possible.
Well, I want to make it my future. Really, I really do. I've given it everything I have. Everything I have. If it doesn't work, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I really enjoy it. It's actually, last May I was down, morale was gone. I was kind of, you're feeling really down and out. Within maybe 3 months I was back to normal again. I was getting up in the morning, getting shaved, washing the face and the clean shirt and into work.
Is it warm today? Let's do.
As you were saying about the weather.
I think it's very limited, unfortunately, although there's plenty of talent. For people to make a living out of music here is impossible. I mean, there are a couple of people in this orchestra who should really possibly be working professionally or good enough to be making a proper living out of it, but there isn't the work there.
Oh, if you saw about 1 in every 400 probably does make it. You reckon that is tough, very tough.
London is one of the great musical centres of the world. So any city practically compared with London is not going to be exciting from a classical music point of view after London. Now, obviously in Dublin we don't have that, we can't afford it. We can't afford to bring over these people, very, very rarely. And I do miss that, and I find I don't really go to concerts in Dublin anymore. I know from listening to my parents talk that it was a regular feature of Dublin's musical life, say 30 years ago, in the old Theatre Royal, which I don't remember at all. But they had everybody, Rubinstein, Horowitz. My parents heard them both play there. And I don't think that it would be impossible to turn Dublin into a music centre because it's so close to London. I must say I love living in Dublin. There's a tremendous thing about Dublin in that you're so close to the sea, you're so close to the mountains, and this is something that means a great deal to me. And I go out every weekend, and sometimes in the evenings, in the summer, just to get out into the mountains, to get out into Wicklow. I love it, Glendalough, Jouse Woods, Sallygap, all that. I go there again and again. I like the smallness of the city, the fact that it's very easy to get around. I know we say we've terrible traffic problems, but you can still get around the city very, very quickly, as long as you're not travelling in the rush hour. And I like people. I feel at home with my own people. And all that is very good. I like to go down O'Connell Street on a Saturday night, go to the movies, eat in Bessoff's, fish and chips, whatever. I enjoy that. I enjoy the buzz of young Dubliners out on a night out, because they're great crack. And I think another aspect of Dublin that I like very much is just the way people relate to each other, the way they look at each other, the way they're quick to make a contact. They won't talk to you, but they'll look at you, and you look back. When I was living in London, I found that there's very, very little of this contact. And you go down the tube and nobody looks at each other. It's like some kind of taboo. You don't look, and everybody has their space and they just keep in that. And this was one thing that made me feel in exile. The street I live on, which is Sweetmount Avenue, always aesthetically pleased me very much, and that was one reason why I decided to live there. I had looked for a house for about a year, and they were going to build on Sweetmount Avenue, and the road itself I like very much, and it's very soothing to walk up it because of all the trees. I find Dundrum itself is buzzy. The people there, again, neighbours, very friendly, very easy. Shopping centre's great, it's dead handy, and everything is there. I feel very, very comfortable in Dundrum. It's not very far from where I was brought up as well, which was Rathgar, so it's familiar. The social life of Dublin is very rich. It's something that I've never really participated in greatly. I don't go to nightclubs. I've never been hardly down Neeson Street. A little bit in recent times, since Classical Graffiti started, because a lot of the musicians are, well, for a start, a lot of them are younger than me. They've got great energy. They love to go out and have a good time late at night. So I found myself in some strange places since I started this orchestra, but would never choose to do it myself. Would only go into pubs if I was meeting friends. So it's very much my own social life is centred around my friends. If I go out to meet them, that's fine. But I won't deliberately go out looking for it. But I'm well aware, if I was ever lonely, and I mean at times it has happened where I might just take myself off to a drink down in a local, and I enjoy the buzz around, because Dubliners are full of vitality when they're out for a night.
I don't think I ever came across a female conductor before. It can be a little bit difficult, I think, sometimes with a woman conductor, but it seems to work out much better now that people have got into the way of it over the year.
No difference. I mean, she's up there, she's a figurehead. You know, she moves the baton, and if she says stop, you stop, and she says go, you go. Female doesn't come into it at all. It's just a conductor in the story.
I think it presents a different angle for, from a publicity point of view, because she is the only professional woman conductor in Ireland. And I always thought that that was a good angle for newspapers to pitch onto, and they have.
I believe that men will have a great difficulty to match the untiring energy of Ethna Tinney, who's not only the conductor, who's also the driving force behind the scheme. She's worked for 1.5 years in advance of actually setting up Classical Graffiti, trying to get the government's agreement to it, and she's keeping the thing together from an organisational point, as well as conducting and deciding on music. No problem with a woman being the driving force.
The problem in the business is managers mightn't be happy, you know, because they don't know whether you can handle it, a woman can handle it, so they avoid using women, there's no question. But that's slowly but surely changing. Personally, I don't think that there's any problem at all about being a woman and a conductor, and I don't think about it at all. I came from a family where all the women worked, all of them, all my aunts and my mother, and all in high-powered jobs, and therefore I was brought up to feel that women can do anything. So it never struck me as being odd to want to conduct. There are quite a few women conductors, but so far nobody has managed to become famous, let's just put it like that, and therefore people don't think of women as being conductors. But because the conducting position is one of power, just as to lead a country is a position of power, or anything else, being a managing director of a firm, women are traditionally not seen as being the keepers of power, and therefore people find it very strange. Curiously enough, for me, I didn't actually think about conducting for quite some time, and in fact that has made my life, if you like, a little bit more difficult, because if I had known when I was 17 that I wanted to be a conductor instead of wanting to be a pianist, as I did then, I think things would have been a bit easier for me. But basically I was becoming drawn by it. I was watching conductors a lot, and then there was a master class given here in 1982 by Janusz First, and I went to it just to watch what was going on, and I ended up participating a lot, playing the piano for the other conductors. And everything he talked about, I seemed to understand, as if I knew it already, somewhere inside of me. And I was just bitten by this bug. I wanted to try this thing. I wanted to do it myself. And that's how I got involved in the wish to conduct. But it is fascinating looking at how other conductors have become conductors, because it's not like playing an instrument. You can't just get up there and do it. You must have an orchestra. So where do you get an orchestra to show what you can do? And when you read biographies of conductors, it can be very interesting, because often that point, that initial point where they first showed that they could do it, is not revealed. And I would say there's a lot of dark secrets, a lot of manipulation, you know, in the lives of a lot of people who want to conduct. They might marry money, as Kusevitsky did, but he did it quite openly, married a millionairess, and started his own orchestra, paid them, you know, fine, why not? Carry-On was interesting for me, because he was a bit similar to me in that he was a bit of an impresario early in life, and he saved money in Vienna when he was still a student, and put on a concert with the best musicians. And he was craftier than me, though, because he invited all the managers of all the opera houses in Germany to this concert. And that's how he got his first job in Ulm. He was given a job out of it. I tried the carry-on thing, you know, and had a string orchestra here that we did 4 concerts. It cost me quite a lot of money, you know. I couldn't make it a box office proposition. Orchestras are incredibly expensive. I mean, what you need to have an orchestra is you need a lot of money. And quite honestly, what I saw in the SES when I became aware of the social employment scheme was that there was money that I could use. I mean, it wasn't so much that I wanted to help the unemployed, although I did think, wouldn't it be great now if we get something going here in this country where there is a terrible problem with unemployment. Great. But the principal thing I saw was there is money that can be used to make salaries, to make a job for myself, to get the wherewithal to make an orchestra. But I think the thing is that you are fighting in the dark in the early stages of any big undertaking, and you've got to have the courage to go on. Music for me has always been a tremendous stimulus of the imagination, of the passions, of longing, certainly. The great thing about music is that you can never put a picture on it, if you like. When you listen to music, you know what you feel. I don't visualize it. I sometimes feel so strongly I have to jump up if I'm listening to music in my own house and start conducting it or something, or start expressing it physically. That's the power it has on me. I wouldn't dare to describe some of the things it makes me think about because that's too personal. But certainly I think for me why I've loved music and made it my life is because it stimulates me at every level. You know, one of the things that really amuses me is that a lot of people say to me, oh, they'd love to conduct. And you know the way they say it, that they actually think it'd be quite easy and they could probably do it. And I mean, I know that at least 50% of every orchestra thinks that they could conduct better than the person who's doing it. I think that in some senses it's not difficult. Technically, it's not like playing an instrument. You have to learn for years and years and years how to play an instrument. The basic technique of conducting, if we're just talking about stick technique and beating bars, 3 in a bar, 4 in a bar, 6 in a bar, there are patterns that are established, and you can learn them very quickly. That's child's play. But to transmit, say, rhythm, real rhythm, through beating is a different story. And you can do that, and they don't know where to come in if you can't conduct. I mean, and you can do it very firmly, and you can beat your hand around, and they still won't be able to do it, you know. So this is a gift. This is just a talent to be able to transmit rhythm, first of all, and secondly, feeling, expression, through your body, through your hands, through your eyes, the expression on your face, the shift of the shoulder. It's a total thing, you know. And that can be quite different with different conductors. You get some conductors like Adrian Bolt now. Never moved at all, except the stick. That's all. Great conductor. You have Leonard Bernstein. You have to strap him down. He's like a whirling dervish. Great conductor. Completely different styles, you know. And this is where we get into the personality realm, you see, because the transmission of what you feel is your personality.
It's not rhythmic enough in the brass. Could I just hear what the trombones do there? 1, 2 before B. Give me the bar 2 before B. 3, 4. Good. Yeah, it's a bit flat down there on the bottom. Yep, going on the horn so low. Yeah. Let's hear you on your own, Mary, and see maybe if you better cut it out. 3, 4. Yes, it's better. Yeah, good. Okay. The trumpets there before C or in B. Where do you come in?
2 bars before C on a semi-breathe with a tight crotchet to it.
And that's it. Just one note.
Just the one note.
Yeah. So what I'm imagining something. So, okay, let's hear it again. Let's just have B. Want to hear what's going on? Here we go. Bit of a mess. 3, 4.
The routine of rehearsal is one of the things that turns me on most about conducting. Not the actual performance. I find the performances are easy. Where the skill comes in is the rehearsal. How you keep them interested, not to bore them, when you have to go over the same stuff. How long you spend on a certain number of bars. How you modify your physical gestures when you find that something isn't working. Because this is what you must always be alert to when you're rehearsing. You have to realise when it's your fault and when it's their fault. And sometimes it's their fault, and they're just not paying attention enough. Or the thing is difficult. It's going to take a bit of time. But sometimes it's your fault, and you're not being clear enough. You can't keep asking them to play the thing over and over again just for your benefit. So you have to be snappy. If your gestures aren't working there and then on the spot, you have to come up with something else. And that's very stimulating, because it's a whole physical expression of music, which is quite ephemeral, really. And there's no rules about it. Different conductors express themselves physically quite differently.
Do it with me once. 3, 4. Ba, 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 dee, da, ba, ba. Yeah, that's the style. Okay, let's all take it a day then.
So that is the essential thing, the personality of the man or the woman who has the musical ability and knowledge as well to be able to deal with scores and all the complexities of scores, and to be able to transmit it because of the way they think, the way they feel. And finally, being a natural leader. Nobody can learn to be a leader. I'm convinced of that. You either are a leader and people will follow you and will take your leadership, or else you can forget it. You can't learn that out of a book, that's for sure. So I think then we have to think a little bit when we talk about conducting as well about the score. And score reading is very complicated. You know, if you're going to do the job well, which means that you literally know every note that every instrument has to play, that you could sing through the second oboe part or the bass line by yourself. The number of hours of study that involves means a colossal amount of self-discipline. So nobody can be a conductor who can't take themselves to a table or a piano, wherever they like to work, and work for hours and hours and hours on their own. That's very important too. My greatest training for being a conductor was sitting in the ranks of the symphony orchestra as a keyboard player. Now I've played with the symphony orchestra as a soloist as well, but that's a different ball game entirely. But I feel that really where you learn about conducting is sitting under other conductors and seeing what works and what doesn't. Listening to the musicians talking around you and learning something about the psychology of orchestral musicians. You learn much more from a player saying that they can't follow something, or they don't like something, or they find a gesture difficult, than you'll ever get advice from another conductor. Conducting can be physically tiring if you're not in the routine of it. When you conduct 5 days out of 7, you don't suffer any muscular tiredness. And maybe I'm lucky, but I think I've got a lot of energy. But I don't usually feel tired from conducting, rather the opposite. It excites me. And I'm usually, you know, awake for hours after I've been conducting, particularly a performance. Classical music can never be treated like rock. But on the other hand, the excitement that's generated at rock concerts, which is a lot of what people go to hear, it's not just the music. It's the excitement, it's the ambience, it's entertainment. I think that's very important in all music, in all performing art. I think that's what really gives people a kick. No matter what they say, that's what they go for. And if they find that, they'll go more and more. So with Classical Graffiti, we're trying to jump across the divide and treat classical music much more as an entertainment than as an art form. It is, of course, an art, but I think it also has to be entertainment. It has to be show business. Great music can arouse emotions. I think a range of feelings that are never tapped by rock or pop music, which would tend to inspire a very limited set of feelings, starting with, say, excitement, maybe love, maybe longing. But you have that also when you listen to a Beethoven symphony. But then you have an awful lot more besides. I think it calls a deeper response from the personality, from the spirit. And that's maybe the difference, a bigger range. I don't really see that the great success that you two have had, followed by the Hothouse Flowers and a few other groups who are doing good now, really would make any difference for classical music. But I think that it can be an inspiration for anybody in show business to realise that you can get out there, as you two did, and be absolutely unheard of. And 5 years later, you can be mega famous and mega rich. And I think that's a great stimulus for anybody. Well, there's a lovely story about the record, because literally I was sitting in Goggins one day, which is the pub next door to the Knoxall, and having lunch, and a guy I knew came up who plays in the Fed Big Band and said, oh, I believe everything's going great and Polygram are going to make a record with you. And I said, is that so? That's very interesting. I'm sure they'll get around to telling me. And he said, oh dear, have I said something? I said, well, I know nothing about it. And the very next day, in walked this man whom I'd never seen before. And I thought he was looking for a job, actually. And I sort of said, would you just wait there for a moment? And we're nearly finished. And he did, very politely, and then said, I'm Paul Ashford and I'm from Polygram and we want to make a record with you. So I said, oh, please, come to say till I talk to you. And literally what had happened was that the managing director of Polygram, Paul Keogh, had heard us playing in Phillips, ironically enough. We've worked with them twice. And this was a going away party for their managing director, and we were playing. And Paul was there, and he heard us, and he liked what he heard. But he didn't know anything about us. And then about a week later, he read an article in the Evening Herald about the orchestra on the dole, or off the dole. And straight away, his interest was ignited, and he decided he was going to make a record with us, which was, of course, fantastic.
Well, we've had a number of projects where we've tried to make classical music more accessible to the general public and take the mystique or the snobbery, if you like, out of classical music. One of the first projects we did was a compilation of the Essential Carrion, which was we put all the more popular pieces of classical music onto one album and translated them for people as to they knew them from TV commercials or whatever the background to the music was, not necessarily a heavyweight explanation of composer or conductor, etc. Now, in Classical Graffiti's case, they had been very active themselves at doing this type of work, making classical, jazz and other forms of music acceptable to a very wide audience, and taking maybe a little bit of a light-hearted approach to music and involving people.
The record is mainly a classical album, which I'm very pleased for, because in fact a lot of the work we do is dance band music. We earn a lot of money. Most of the money we earn is from being a dance band at people's functions. Sometimes they'll ask us to play classical music during the meal, but what they want is the dance band so they can dance to a live orchestra, a big orchestra, and that's a big selling point for us. But with the album, Paul had his own idea of what he was trying to do, which is to cross over this barrier that there is between popular and classical music, and to try and make classical music popular music. The album is basically light classical music, if I can use that expression. It's largely orchestral, but we decided to vary it with pieces that are also just piano pieces. And we also gave one or two of the orchestra a chance to show what they could do individually as well. So we have the Meditation from Thais by Massenet with Christian playing the violin, and we have Jan Perry's show-off solo piece for clarinet played by Conor Shealy. The orchestral stuff, it goes all the way from Handel through to Verdi. Pieces I think that most people would like instantly. You've got the Overture to Nabucco, you've got the Prelude to Carmen, you've got the Farandole from the L'Arlésienne Suites, you've got the Hornpipe from the Water Music, the Arrival of the Queen of Sheba, the Orpheus in the Underworld by Offenbach. So we were certainly going for the ones that people would know and love. And we threw in just one or two surprises. So we did two Irish pieces. One is Macanante's Reel by John Larche, and the other is She Moves Through the Fair. Well, the social life of the orchestra grew over time. When they started, they would have their coffee break and they would chat away amongst themselves. But it didn't really extend beyond that, as far as I recall, for the first 3 months or so. And then you found that they were starting to look for each other's company after the rehearsal and maybe go into Goggins, which is the pub next door, to have lunch. maybe a drink on a Friday, the day they get paid. And then we had our first party about halfway through the year, which was a big success. And people made a lot of effort, and brought in sort of disco music and set up the place nicely with candles and, dim lights and all this kind of stuff. And obviously got a lot of pleasure out of it. So the year has been punctuated by get-togethers, and we're having a barbecue. And, I think the orchestra enjoys each other's company now. Well, my hopes, which may sound a little bit extreme, but this is what I hope, is that, first of all, the orchestra will grow to something slightly larger than it is now. I'd like to see about 30 players in it to balance it, and strings. I would like it to tour. I would like it to be able to provide its players with a decent living. I would like it to be always a contract orchestra, so that players don't stay in it indefinitely. I think the youth aspect is important. I'd like it to have a turnover. I'd like it to have other conductors as well. And I'd like it to become a big thing, both at home and abroad. My personal hopes are to conduct as my principal profession for the rest of my life. I don't really mind where I do it. I like being in Ireland. I like being abroad. I like being in other countries. I like America. I like Southern Europe extremely. So ideally, I would like to live in other countries. I would never want to be just guesting all the time, because I think there's a terrible artistic limit in that. But I think it's ideal to have a change of orchestra, say, every 5 years. And a change of country every 5 years, perhaps, too. Quite seriously, I'd like to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic. I mean, I would love to feel that by the end of my life, I will have conducted the great orchestras. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing it for. That's where I'm heading. Whether I get it, only time will tell.